The dog who forgot. A bond lost to time. The sun was beginning to dip below the Arizona mountains, washing the sky in soft strokes of amber and violet. The dry air carried a faint whisper of the past, a past that Jack Reynolds could never quite escape. He walked with purpose, his boots scuffing against the cracked pavement, each step echoing the weight he carried. 2 years. 2 years since he had left the army. 2 years since he had said goodbye to the battlefield, to the camaraderie, to the one companion who had never let him down. Rex. Jack exhaled, rubbing a hand down his stubbled jaw. The small-town animal shelter loomed ahead, its rusty fences and peeling paint standing as a stark contrast against the fiery horizon. This wasn't where he expected to be. But nothing had gone as expected since the war ended. He had tried everything. Therapy, work, distractions, but nothing filled the empty space inside him. Nothing felt real. His sister, Emily, had suggested he adopt a dog. "You need someone to come home to, Jack. You're not the same without him." She had meant Rex, of course. But Rex was gone. Or so he thought. A fateful encounter. The shelter smelled of disinfectant and old wood, the scent barely masking the mixture of fur and desperation that hung in the air. Rows of cages lined the narrow aisles, each occupied by a hopeful soul, barking or wagging their tails in anticipation. Jack walked slowly, observing. Some dogs were lively, their eyes bright with the hope of finding a home. Others sat quietly, their spirits subdued by the confines of their cages. None of them felt right. Just as he was about to leave, a young shelter worker approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Reynolds, we have a German shepherd in the back." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "A shepherd?" The worker nodded. "He came in a few weeks ago. But he's different." Jack's brows furrowed. Different. He followed her down a dimly lit hallway, past cages filled with dogs that had either lost their faith in humans or never had a reason to trust them in the first place. And then they stopped. The cage in front of him was tucked into the farthest corner. Inside, curled into himself, lay a large German shepherd with black and tan fur. His body was still, his ears slightly flattened, his posture rigid. But his eyes. Jack knew those eyes. His heart hammered against his ribs as his lips parted in an almost disbelieving whisper. "Rex." Recognition that never came. The dog lifted his head, slowly, cautiously. For a brief, hopeful second, Jack expected the old Rex to come bursting through. He expected a wagging tail, excited barks, the overwhelming rush of reunion and relief. Instead, he got nothing. No spark of recognition. No flicker of familiarity. Just a cold, empty stare. Jack felt his stomach drop. He knew this dog. He had fought alongside him, trusted him with his life, shared victories and losses. But now, Rex looked at him like a stranger. The silence pressed against his chest, suffocating, crushing. Jack took a hesitant step forward, his hands gripping the bars of the cage. "Buddy, it's me. It's Jack." The shepherd's ears flicked slightly, but his body remained stiff, unmoving. No tail wag. No excited whine. Just silence. Jack swallowed hard, blinking away the burning sensation in his eyes. He turned to the shelter worker, voice rough. "What happened to him?" She sighed, arms crossing over her chest. "We're not sure." Jack's hands clenched. Where did he come from? The worker hesitated. He was dropped off at a smaller shelter in another state. The previous owner said he was too much to handle. We don't know much beyond that. He's different ***. Jack looked back at the cage. Different. That was an understatement. Rex had been a fighter, a protector, a best friend. Now he was a shadow of his former self. A dog who no longer trusted. A dog who had forgotten him. Jack felt a sharp ache in his chest, a sensation he hadn't felt since the day he left the battlefield. He had lost so much. He couldn't lose Rex too. An unbreakable decision. The shelter worker shifted uncomfortably. "Would you like tow? I'm taking him home." The words left Jack's mouth before he even thought about them. The worker blinked. "Are you sure?" "I don't care." Jack's voice was steady, unwavering. He looked back at Rex, taking in the scars on his leg, the weariness in his eyes, the silent walls he had built around himself. Rex had saved him once, and now it was Jack's turn to do the same. "I don't care how long it takes. I'll bring him back." The worker hesitated before nodding. "All right, let me get the paperwork." Jack turned back to the cage, kneeling down to Rex's level. "We're going home, buddy," he whispered. Rex didn't react. But Jack wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. The road home. The drive was silent. Jack stole glances at Rex in the rearview mirror, watching as the German shepherd lay curled up on the blanket Jack had placed for him. He didn't move, didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him. It was a stark contrast to the old Rex, who had once loved the open road, who had always leaned over the console to lick Jack's face, who had barked excitedly at passing cars. Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter. This was going to take time, and patience, and a hell of a lot of faith. As he pulled up to his house, a small, quiet home on the outskirts of town, surrounded by open land, he parked and took a deep breath. Then he turned to look at Rex. "We're here." The shepherd lifted his head, staring at the house with cautious hesitation. Jack opened the door, stepping out. "Come on, boy." Rex hesitated. For a brief second, Jack feared he wouldn't move at all. But then, slowly, cautiously, mechanically, Rex stepped out of the truck. Each movement was careful, as if he expected something to go wrong. Jack's heart ached. This wasn't the dog he remembered. But just because Rex had forgotten who he was, didn't mean Jack would forget who Rex used to be. "Let's go inside, buddy," Jack murmured. Rex took another step forward, and for the first time since seeing him again, Jack let himself hope. Because this wasn't the end of their story. This was just the beginning. The long road to trust. The truck's engine hummed in the stillness of the Arizona evening. The fading light painted long shadows across the gravel driveway, stretching toward the modest home that now stood before Jack and his old partner. Or rather, the dog who used to be his partner. Jack cut the engine and sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. He stole a glance at the German shepherd in the backseat. Rex didn't move. His large frame was curled up on the blanket Jack had set down for him, his breathing slow but tense. His ears twitched every so often, reacting to the distant sound of wind rustling through the trees. But he didn't acknowledge Jack. He didn't recognize home. Jack let out a slow breath. This wasn't going to be easy. "All right, buddy," he murmured, pushing open the door. "Let's get you inside." The gravel crunched beneath his boots as he stepped out. He walked around to the back, opening the truck door. Rex stayed where he was. His muscles stiffened as his sharp brown eyes flicked toward Jack, watching, analyzing, waiting. Jack crouched down, keeping his movements slow, careful. "Come on, Rex. It's just us now." A long pause. Then, finally, Rex shifted. Slowly, hesitantly, he stepped out onto the ground. His paws pressed into the dirt as he sniffed the air, his posture still rigid. He scanned the area like a soldier assessing a battlefield. Jack sighed. He doesn't feel safe. Not yet. Jack gave him space, letting him take in the surroundings. The house was small but sturdy, built for solitude. A wooden porch wrapped around the front, leading into a cozy interior. Beyond the house stretched acres of open land, a place where Rex could have all the freedom in the world. If only he'd let himself take it. Jack opened the front door, stepping inside first. He left the door open and glanced back. Rex stood at the threshold, hesitant, his paws stopped just before the doorway. For a long moment, he simply stared inside. Jack's throat tightened. "Come on, boy. You're home." A heartbeat passed. Then another. And then Rex stepped in. But he didn't relax. He moved carefully, each step slow and measured, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. His eyes flicked to every shadow, every piece of furniture, every possible escape route. Jack had seen this behavior before. Hyper-awareness, paranoia, a soldier in survival mode. Jack exhaled and walked past him, heading to the kitchen. "Come on, let's get you some food." He grabbed a bowl from the cabinet, filled it with kibble, and set it down on the floor. Rex didn't move. He just stood there, staring. Jack frowned. "You hungry or not?" Still nothing. Then, after a long pause, Rex stepped forward, but instead of eating, he sniffed the food once and walked away. Jack's heart sank. It wasn't the food. It was him. Rex still didn't trust him. Jack ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "All right, buddy. Have it your way." He wouldn't force it. Trust wasn't something you could demand. It had to be earned. Ghosts of the past. That night, Jack barely slept. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Rex move around the house. The dog never settled. Every few minutes, he heard the faint padding of paws against the floorboards, the creak of the wooden porch as Rex stepped outside, then back in, the low huff of breath as he paced. Jack closed his eyes. He knew this feeling all too well. The restless nights, the inability to relax, the ever-present sense of danger, even in the safety of home. PTSD. It wasn't just something humans suffered from. Rex was trapped in the same ward Jack had spent the last 2 years trying to escape, and it was eating him alive. Jack sat up, running a hand over his face. This wasn't going to be as simple as bringing him home and waiting for the past to come back. Rex wasn't the same dog anymore. And maybe Jack wasn't the same man either. But that didn't mean he would give up. Because the one thing Jack had never done, not on the battlefield, not in recovery, not in life, was give up on Rex. And he sure as hell wasn't about to start now. One step forward. The morning was slow. Jack brewed coffee, letting the warmth seep into his hands as he leaned against the counter. Rex sat by the back door, his gaze distant, his body still on high alert. Jack sighed. He needed to find a way to break through to him. He set down his coffee and walked over to the closet, pulling out an old box. Dust coated the top, untouched for years. He popped it open and pulled out a worn, familiar object. A faded green tennis ball. Jack turned it over in his hands, a small smile tugging at his lips. This used to be Rex's favorite. Jack had lost count of how many times he had tossed it across desert camps, how many times Rex had chased it down with unbreakable focus. It was more than just a ball. It was a piece of their past. Jack walked to the back door and nudged it open. The crisp morning air swept in as he stepped outside. Rex followed, hesitating only slightly. Jack knelt down, holding up the ball. "Remember this, buddy." Rex's eyes flicked to it, but there was no spark of excitement, no wagging tail, no eager stance. Jack's heart clenched. Still, he wasn't giving up. With a deep breath, he tossed it. The ball bounced across the yard, rolling to a stop a few feet away. Rex didn't move. Jack exhaled through his nose. He took a step forward, kneeling beside Rex. Not commanding, not expecting, just being there. "Hey, it's okay," he murmured. "You don't have to chase it." "Not yet." Rex's ears flicked, but he didn't look at him. Jack sat there for a long time, the wind rustling the leaves above them. And then, finally, Rex moved. Slowly, hesitantly, he took a step forward and sniffed the ball. Jack held his breath. Then, after a long pause, Rex picked it up. Not with excitement, not with enthusiasm, but with familiarity. Jack smiled, his chest aching with something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't a full breakthrough, but it was something. A small step toward trust. And for now, that was enough. Shadows of the battlefield. The air was crisp as the sun began its slow descent beyond the Arizona hills, painting the sky in muted oranges and fading blues. The wind carried the scent of pine and dry earth, a reminder of the open world surrounding Jack's quiet home. Yet, despite the serenity of the landscape, the battlefield still lived inside them both. Jack sat on the porch steps, a cold beer in one hand, his eyes trained on the large German shepherd lying a few feet away in the yard. Rex had his head resting on his paws, his body still tense, his ears flicking at the sound of every rustling leaf or distant car passing down the dirt road. Even here, he never let his guard down. Jack exhaled slowly. He knew the feeling all too well. It had been weeks since he brought Rex home, and while there had been small signs of progress, the dog still carried an invisible wall around him, a barrier built from years of distrust, abandonment, and pain. Jack had spent years training Rex in combat. Now he had to teach him something far more difficult. He had to teach him how to be safe again. A test of trust. Jack ran a hand through his scruffy beard and stood, stretching his sore muscles. He had spent the better part of the day working outside, chopping wood, fixing the old fence, giving himself something to do. Something that wasn't just waiting. He glanced at Rex again. "You up for a walk, buddy?" The shepherd barely lifted his head. His dark eyes met Jack's for only a moment before he looked away. Jack sighed. Not today, then. He walked back inside, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. He wasn't surprised when he turned around and saw Rex still lying at the threshold of the back door, watching him, waiting. He never left Jack's side. But he never came close either. That was their routine now, a constant push and pull. Jack let out a quiet chuckle. "You're stubborn as hell, you know that." Rex's ear twitched. Jack took another sip of water and leaned against the counter. His mind drifted to the past, to the first time he had met Rex. He had been just a pup then, all ears, all energy, all instinct. Rex had been assigned to him when Jack was deployed in Afghanistan. From the very first day, they had trained together, fought together, bulled together. They had saved each other's lives more times than he could count. And then Jack had been sent home, and Rex had been left behind. Jack swallowed hard. He had spent years assuming Rex had been given a good home, retired with dignity. But instead, he had been abandoned, forgotten, passed from owner to owner, shelter to shelter, until he had learned to expect nothing from the people around him. Jack clenched his fists. If he had known, if he had just known, he would have found a way to take him sooner. But he hadn't. And now, Rex was here. Damaged, mistrusting, lost. Just like Jack. A sudden trigger. Jack finished his water and set the bottle down. He grabbed Rex's leash from the hook by the door. Maybe today wouldn't be a walk, but it could be something. He walked out onto the porch, keeping his steps slow, calm. Rex's eyes flicked to the leash, and Jack saw the way his body tensed. Jack stopped. "Easy, bud," he murmured. "We're not going anywhere far. Just you and me. No danger. No missions." Rex didn't move. Jack knelt, setting the leash down in the dirt between them. He sat back, resting his hands on his knees. It was a long, painful moment of silence. Then, Rex shifted. Slowly, cautiously, he crawled forward. Jack held his breath, not daring to move. Rex sniffed the leash once. Then again. Jack barely had time to react before something changed. A distant sound. A helicopter flying overhead. The instant the blades whirred through the sky, Rex's ears flattened. His whole body stiffened. His tail dropped. Jack barely had time to process it before Rex suddenly whipped around, snarling. Jack's instincts kicked in. "Rex. Hey, hey." But Rex was somewhere else now. His eyes were wild, his body rigid, his hackles raised. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from his chest. Jack didn't move. He knew better. This wasn't Rex standing in front of him anymore. This was a soldier in survival mode. Jack kept his voice low, steady, controlled. "Buddy, it's me." Rex's growl deepened. His eyes were filled with fear, not aggression. Jack had seen this before. He had lived this before. This wasn't just a reaction. This was a flashback. Rex was back in a war zone. And Jack had to bring him back. Bringing him home. Jack stayed perfectly still. His mind raced through everything he had ever learned about trauma response. Rex wasn't attacking. He was defending himself against an enemy that wasn't there. Jack spoke again, his voice low, reassuring. "Rex, it's okay. You're here. You're safe." The shepherd's whole body trembled. His muscles quivered with tension, but he didn't lunge. He didn't advance. Jack took a slow breath. "You know me, buddy." A long, agonizing pause. Then, Rex blinked. His head tilted slightly. Jack saw the first sign of hesitation. He took his chance. Very, very slowly, Jack reached out. And this time, Rex didn't pull away. Jack's fingers barely brushed against his fur, but that was all it took. The moment Jack made contact, Rex let out a soft, strangled whimper. And just like that, he collapsed. Not in fear, not in submission. In exhaustion. Jack caught him as best as he could, wrapping his arms around the trembling shepherd, his heart hammering. Rex let out a broken, shuddering breath. Jack closed his eyes. "I got you," he whispered. "You're home, bud. You're safe." For the first time in weeks, Rex didn't pull away. He leaned into Jack's touch, his head pressing against his shoulder. And Jack felt it. The wall was cracking. Not gone. Not fully. But for the first time, Rex let himself believe in him again. And for Jack, that was all that mattered. The dog who found his way back. The world was quiet in a way Jack hadn't felt in years. Not the kind of quiet that came with loneliness or emptiness. No, this was something else. It was peaceful. For the first time since he had brought Rex home, Jack wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. The shepherd lay beside him on the porch, his head resting on his paws, his body finally relaxed. His chest rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm, his ears twitching every so often at the rustling of leaves. Jack leaned back against the wooden railing, beer in one hand, gaze fixed on the horizon. The Arizona sky stretched wide before him, a blend of soft blues and golds as the sun dipped lower. They had been through hell to get to this moment, but somehow they had made it. The final test. It had been weeks since Rex's last episode. The flashbacks had come less frequently now, and when they did, they didn't consume him like before. Jack had learned how to bring him back faster. But today was the real test. Because today, for the first time since bringing Rex home, Jack had left him alone. Not for long. Just for a few hours, but long enough to see if Rex was truly ready to trust again. Jack had half expected to come home to chaos. Maybe torn up furniture, maybe a destroyed doorframe, maybe nothing at all. But when he pulled into the driveway, Rex had been there, sitting on the porch, waiting. The shepherd had lifted his head as Jack stepped out of the truck, his ears perking up. And then, for the first time in years, Rex ran to him, not cautiously, not hesitantly, with trust, with recognition. Jack had barely managed to drop his keys before Rex was at his side, pushing his head into his chest, his body pressing against him like he never wanted to let go. Jack had let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. And just like that, he knew. They had won. A bond that never broke. Now, as they sat together on the porch, Jack finally let himself believe it. The war was over. Not just the one they had fought overseas. Not just the one that had left them both broken. The war inside them. Jack reached down, running his fingers through Rex's thick fur. The dog leaned into the touch. And then, Rex did something Jack hadn't seen in a decade. His tail wagged. Jack smiled. A real, genuine smile. Not the forced kind he had given doctors and therapists. Not the hollow kind he had worn for the world. This was real. "Yeah, buddy," he murmured. "I missed you too." Rex lifted his head, licking Jack's hand. The motion was slow, hesitant at first, as if even he didn't quite believe it. But then, just like before, he leaned his weight against Jack's side, like he used to do on long nights in the barracks. Like he had done before every mission, before every battle, before every moment of uncertainty. Like he had always done when they were partners. Jack exhaled. No, they weren't just partners. They were family. A new beginning. Jack took a sip of his beer and set it down beside him. "All right, bud," he said, stretching. "Let's go for a walk." This time, when Jack grabbed the leash, Rex didn't tense. He didn't hesitate. He didn't see it as a command. He saw it as a choice. Jack opened the gate, and for the first time in years, Rex didn't just walk beside him. He ran. The old shepherd's muscles rippled as he sprinted across the open land, kicking up dust in his wake. The wind ruffled his fur, his ears flapping slightly as he turned back to look at Jack, as if waiting for him to catch up. Jack laughed. Not just because of the moment. Not just because of Rex. But because, for the first time in as long as he could remember, he felt free too. They had both been lost. They had both been forgotten. But together, they had found their way back. And this time, nothing would take them from each other again. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.